Howdy, gang, and welcome once again to the Duct Tape Studios. I'm Jeff McAleer, your host here at the Gaming Gang channel. Thanks for joining me once again. Today, I'll be sharing a Kickstarter preview of Heart of Cthulhu 1912 from Lost in the Woods. And before we dive on in, I do want to mention I have been compensated for this video. You know me, I like to let you know that right up front. So this is currently on Kickstarter, and as I talk about Heart of Cthulhu 1912, we're actually going to take a peek inside the introductory adventure for Heart of Cthulhu 1912, and that is Titanic Day 1. First thing we'll do is take a peek inside at the credits page. A lot of folks work very hard to bring this to life, so let's give credit where credit is due. I do want to mention this adventure is absolutely free in PDF. So unlike most of my first look videos and review videos, we're going to take a look at far more pages as I'm talking about Heart of Cthulhu 1912 and this adventure than I would normally share, because I figured, well, the PDF is available out there absolutely free. It's all right if we take a peek at a lot of the pages within. So, Heart of Cthulhu 1912 is a Lovecraftian horror tabletop role-playing game. It is built specifically for the Daggerheart system. It's designed from the ground up rather than adapted from another rule set. The game embraces Daggerheart's narrative mechanics while still supporting tactical combat, action, and investigative horror. Set in the uneasy years before World War I, game explores a world standing at the crossroads of modernity and collapse. The year 1912 serves as both a backdrop and warning sign, a period of technological optimism, rigid class systems, imperial expansion, and deep cultural change. Central to the setting is the doomed voyage of the RMS Titanic, reimagined as a key narrative gateway into the horrors of the mythos. Unlike many Lovecraft-inspired role-playing games that focus heavily on New England, Heart of Cthulhu 1912 presents a global perspective. The setting emphasizes that eldritch entities, ancient mysteries, and forbidden lore are not confined to Lovecraft country, but instead emerge from cultures and histories around the world. The game is divided into two core volumes, a player's book as well as a guide's book. Each full-color hardcover is planned to exceed 250 pages and features entirely human-created artwork, including contributions from acclaimed fantasy artist Paolo Barbieri. The design philosophy also remains very close to Daggerheart's core mechanics to ease the transition for existing players, adding new systems only when necessary to support cosmic horror storytelling. The game also includes guidance for blending traditional horror elements such as ghosts, vampires, and curses into a mythos-inspired setting. Drawing heavily from the works of H.P. Lovecraft while reinterpreting them through a modern lens, Heart of Cthulhu 1912 focuses on investigative horror, fragile certainty, and humanity confronting forces far, far beyond its understanding. Set against the final years before the Great War, Heart of Cthulhu 1912 uses the doomed voyage of the Titanic as both a narrative centerpiece as well as a symbol of an era on the brink of collapse. In the setting's interpretation, the Titanic represents more than a historical tragedy. It becomes a reflection of the world of 1912 itself. Rigid class divisions, the meeting of old traditions and modern industry, a widespread belief that human progress and reason has mastered nature. While the real Titanic was defeated by the natural world, Heart of Cthulhu 1912 asks, what might happen if something even more terrifying awaited beneath the surface, and whether the characters aboard could alter the ship's fate at all. Game, once again, is set just 2 years before the outbreak of World War I, a conflict that would shatter empires, weaken the aristocracy, reshape colonial powers, and mark the end of an age of exploration and certainty. The setting leans into that tension, portraying a world where the modern and ancient coexist uneasily, each aware of the other as the storm of history approaches. This atmosphere also reflects the formative years of H.P. Lovecraft himself, whose fiction often explored fear of the unknown alongside humanity's fragile confidence in science and civilization. Rather than focusing solely on New England or traditional Lovecraft country, Heart of Cthulhu 1912 presents a broader global perspective. The setting emphasizes that the horrors of the mythos are not limited to Massachusetts, but instead emerge from cultures, legends, and histories across the entire world. Now, as far as this adventure, this is an introductory adventure designed for Daggerheart. It's important to keep that in mind. This is not a quick start for Heart of Cthulhu 1912. I was kind of surprised by that, but I also understand why it's not just a quick start, because folks out there who already have Daggerheart or simply grab the SRD for Daggerheart can utilize this. There are some references as well to the mechanics, the new systems that will be included in Heart of Cthulhu 1912 that do skew from the Daggerheart core, especially the characters and character classes. That is quite different. And there are going to be rules for sanity and madness, of course. But just taking a peek through this, you can see the production quality is excellent. The artwork is awesome. The adventure itself is really the first part of the Titanic campaign, I guess I would say, because this is day one. The characters are brought on board the Titanic by a doctor who believes that there is a mythos relic which has been brought aboard the Titanic and which has an influence that will be spreading throughout the passengers. So the premise of this first adventure is for the player characters to find this relic and stop the cultists who are utilizing the relic to try to influence the passengers and crew of the Titanic. There's quite a bit more that's going on here. I want to stay away from spoilers. You may have seen some spoilers just simply as I was flipping on through, but I got to say, very interesting concept here, using the Titanic as a centerpiece for Heart of Cthulhu 1912. And it does really represent the end of an era and the beginning of another, and the clash of various different factors during that time period. Something else that's very important to mention about Heart of Cthulhu 1912 is that global perspective. To my understanding, there are going to be 5 different locations which are going to receive pretty deep delves, such as, of course, the RMS Titanic, Paris. I think New York is another one. There's a desert location. In fact, I think it might be Masada. But really cool. And I'm curious about this. I am really intrigued as someone who has run Call of Cthulhu for well over 4 decades. I'm always on the lookout for new takes on the Cthulhu mythos and cosmic horror. And it really does strike me that Heart of Cthulhu 1912 is going to go in a very unique direction. I mean, we are looking at a global perspective as far as the mythos, and the vast majority of Cthulhu related role playing games out there have a very, very strong focus on North America and very Lovecraft country centric. That is not going to be the case here. Although North America is not going to get left out, I want to say I think it's New York that's going to receive one of the 5 campaign frameworks. So my interest is very much piqued by Heart of Cthulhu 1912. Got to be very, very honest with you. I have not had an opportunity to take a peek at the guides book as well as the player's book. But if this introductory adventure is any indication of production quality as far as artwork and layout, should be really, really nicely done. Also, want to mention those two core books are going to contain everything you need to play Heart of Cthulhu 1912. To my understanding, you are not going to require anything from Daggerheart in order to run this role playing game. So everything will be contained in those two core books. I also do understand that the Titanic storyline will continue. I believe it's going to be in the guides book, obviously enough. So you will have more than just day one on the Titanic. Now, speaking of those two core books, they are currently up on Kickstarter. Yes, the project is live. It funded within the first 12 hours, and you can reserve copies of the two hardcovers with PDFs for a pledge of approximately $97, because this is outside the United States, exchange rates, thus the approximately. If you want to score just the PDFs alone, you can do so for a pledge of approximately $50 through May 28th. And expected fulfillment is this December. So that is a nice, tight turnaround. So to me, that tells me these books are done. They're ready to go. They're good to go to the printer. So as soon as this project ends, I wouldn't be shocked if within a week or two, those files are sent off to the printer. So very, very nice that we got a really quick turnaround on the Heart of Cthulhu 1912. Of course, the introductory adventure, Titanic Day 1, is absolutely free in PDF over at Drive-Thru RPG. I will include a link to that down in the show notes. Of course, there'll also be a link to the Kickstarter project for you as well. So if you want to take Heart of Cthulhu 1912 out on a bit of a test run, keeping in mind that the adventure is designed for Daggerheart, there are references to rule changes and system changes, which you will find in Heart of Cthulhu 1912, but they're either just mentioned or they're just kind of really streamlined in this adventure. Keep in mind, it is an adventure. It is not a quick start. So you do need to have the Daggerheart rules or the Daggerheart SRD in order to run Titanic Day 1. But give it a try. Check it out. Download it for free. It is 75 pages. And as you already saw, it's got some really cool artwork, very nice layout. The adventure itself is interesting. It's different. It takes a far more narrative approach than a lot of Cthulhu role-playing games out there. Now, that may not be everyone's bag of tricks, where there's not going to be tons of pulse-pounding combat. This is not Pulp Cthulhu by any stretch of the imagination. But if you are really into story and character development, then Titanic Day 1 should be right up your alley. All right, everyone, that is it for this time out. If you like the video, by all means, please give it a quick thumbs up. Subscribe to the Gaming Gang channel if you haven't already. And if you do subscribe, don't forget, ring that bell. And if you do ring the bell, be sure to mark all notifications, because it's supposed to let you know not only when I share videos such as this Kickstarter preview, it should also inform you when my live stream, the Gaming Gang Dispatch, airs Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday evenings right here on YouTube at 7 p.m. Central. Of course, when you're not watching videos on the Gaming Gang channel, be sure to visit gaminggang.com for all the latest in tabletop gaming news, reviews, and a whole lot more you are never going to find here on YouTube. You know the drill. Get your geek on at thegaminggang.com. Once again, I'm Jeff McAleer. Thank you very much for watching. And until I see you next time, certainly hope all of you get to enjoy plenty of great gaming with your gang.